Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited that you decided to listen to today's podcast, to today's chat with Dr. Sharon Stills. Dr. Stills is passionate about helping women just like you and me become fearless, adventurous, and confident in life. And don't we just want that? She's a naturopathic physician with over 20 years' experience. She's worked with women of all ages as they navigate the journey of life using her training in European biological medicine, natural treatments, protocols, and supportive healing methods. Sharon and I met last year. I actually searched her out on Instagram, found her over there, really liked her content and felt very aligned with it. Yeah, you know, when you find someone, you're like, yep, she's speaking my language. Well, that was Dr. Stills for me. And so I asked her to come on to our membership, and she did a presentation on hormones and menopause. And then she asked me to help promote her Menopause Transition Summit, which so many of you went to. A wonderful summit all about menopause and all of the things that we're going to experience, or maybe we have going through that transition. That is coming up again this year. Dr. Stills, welcome to our chat today. Let's just jump into that while we're on the topic of the Menopause Transition Summit. Tell us what we're going to look forward to this fall.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. And yes, and I'm super excited because this year I got to interview you for the summit. And so we have a great talk on there. And yeah, the Menopause Summit just kind of grew out of my desire, my mission to really change the conversation, to elevate the conversation, and to clear up so many of the misconceptions around menopause, from hormones to diet to mindset. Yeah. And, you know, it's just, there's so many things in medicine that are misunderstood, but menopause is such a huge one of them. It's such a paradigm that really needs a shift. And so the summit is a way for me to interview experts like yourself and really put together, curate, like, this is the information I want the ladies to know. So it's a lot of fun to do. I'm very grateful that I get to be the steward of this conversation. And the feedback we got from last year, you know, just women who are just like, wow, I didn't know that. I feel heard. I feel seen. I'm going to do something different. That makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah, it was a lot of information that just really helped clarify things for me anyway, as I listened to the other professionals talk. You know, just things that you hear in sort of conversation in passing, but you don't really know. And everyone has so many different ideas about what to do and how to manage menopause. But this really cleared it up. And we're looking forward to another one. And that is in September. October
5th.
September 5th.
11th. The summit will be, you know, it goes live every day for 7 days, and you have 24-hour access for free to listen to any or all, depending upon how much time you have on your hands, of the talks for the day. And you can pick and choose, or for a small fee, you can purchase the summit and then just have it in your library to refer back to. So it is really exciting.
It is for everyone, for sure. All right. Well, today, you know, the majority of my audience are women between the age of 40 to 65, 70. So we have women in that sort of midlife, right? Going through perimenopause, going through menopause, struggling with a lot of things when it comes to their fitness, wellness, and nutrition. So many people blame the menopause for the struggles in that. And so we want to jump into that today. We want to talk about some of those things. We want to talk about, you know, fatigue, tiredness, different symptoms that we might get, nutrition, how all of that can play a role and impact this journey as we go through it. So let me start by asking you this question first. So, how can women effectively manage these fluctuating hormones during this time of our life, during menopause, in order to alleviate some of the symptoms that we have? Like, we're talking hot flashes, mood swings, insomnia. How do we manage those fluctuating hormones?
The $1 million question. So, you know, perimenopause is, I always describe it, it's like this roller coaster, because you can have high estrogen and then it plummets and then it goes back up. Because just think of it like the the ovaries, the communication between the brain and the ovaries and the release of hormones, it's starting to wind down. And it doesn't always, it's not just like an on-off switch. For some women it is. For some women it's like, I was getting a period every month and now bam, all of a sudden I never got it again. And that could be very dramatic. It's like your hormones just decided to go cliff diving. And all of a sudden you went from having hormones to nothing. And the symptoms can come on very extreme and can be very severe. For other women,
yeah.
what's that?
I was going to say, is that more common that people get it very acutely, or is it more common to get it gradually?
It's really across the board. I mean, in all the 21 years I've been working with patients, I see a little bit of both, but I would say probably more common for the gradual and the fluctuation and the, now I get my period every 2 weeks, or I bleed very heavy, or then I'm not getting my period for 3 months and then it shows up and then it's gone. So that's more typical, but I do see a fair amount of where it's just like here one day, gone the next. And there's really, you know, we can look at our mothers or our aunties and kind of see what they went through and use that as a guide sometimes. But a lot of times, like in my personal situation, my mother had a hysterectomy because she was bleeding heavy. So now, knowing what I know now, I mean, at the time I was, you know, not even on a medical journey, but, you know, she needed progesterone, she needed some liver support, and had we done that for her, she wouldn't have needed the hysterectomy. But hindsight's always 2020. Yeah. So, so managing those fluctuations can be very individualized. It really depends, because it really is all over the board. Some women are like, I don't have a period and I'm really doing okay. And so to me, the symptoms are always a sign of how much or how little the body is out of balance. And menopause it's not a disease. It like always pisses me off that there's an ICD-10 code for it, and you can
Is that right?
You know, yeah, because it's a normal, natural transition that every woman is going to go through. Now you might go through it in your late 40s or your early 40s if there's some things going on. You might go through it in your late 50s, your early 50s. There's a wide variation. We say the average age is 50. But that's average. So some of us are earlier, some of us are later. And so that when I have a patient who comes in, they're in that perimenopausal state and they're fluctuating, I'm like, okay, we're going to be on a little ride here, and we're going to do the best to manage your system, your body, your terrain, your lymphatic flow, etc. And we can talk about all that, so that your hormones kind of, as they're winding down, the body is a more stable place. I don't do a ton of testing. If you've heard me speak before, you know I'm very big on 24-hour urine testing for looking at metabolites of hormones. However, when you're in this time, I just want you all to be aware, because I see it happen a lot with patients who come in other places. If you get tested while you're in perimenopause, you got to take it with a grain of salt, because remember, roller coaster. So if you're getting tested, we don't know, or you're just about to go down the hill and hands are in the air and you're screaming, you're at the bottom of the hill. So it could be very misleading, like, oh no, your estrogen is fine because you just caught it at that time. And so a lot of it has to go by symptoms and by what you're experiencing. And you could do some testing, but you just have to realize it's not the same as when you were postmenopausal and you do a test and it's like, here's your level.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's such a good point, I think, because, well, even myself, I don't think I'm quite menopausal yet, but I'm like, oh, I should get everything tested right now, because sometimes I feel like this and sometimes I feel like that. But basically what you're saying, it's going to be the most beneficial, and then you're more likely to be treated once you've had that year of no periods, and then you get your tested and then you'll know your levels. Is that?
Well, not exact. So talking about 24-hour urine testing, you don't wait a year. I test women when they haven't had a period for a good 6 months, a good 8 months.
Okay.
And they're asymptomatic, but there's lots of other testing we can be doing. We can be looking at thyroid in the blood. We can be looking at cortisol in the saliva. We can be looking at the gut microbiome via stool test. We can be looking at toxins and how they're playing a role. And we could do some blood work tests. We can look at FSH and LH and see, are they rising? And that's a clue so that's standardly in standard medicine, that's what's looked at. Is your follicle stimulating hormone elevated, you're in menopause. And if it's not, you're not, and there's nothing to talk about. And so we know that it rises, you could be very perimenopausal and it might not have risen yet. It's different for everyone. So a lot of it is symptoms. And so it's working with someone who can really understand symptoms. If you are having I'll just throw out a few, for example.
Yeah, do that. Yeah.
Heart palpitations are often the estrogen dropping.
Okay.
Insomnia or anxiety is often a progesterone deficiency. Heavy bleeding is often a progesterone deficiency, but sometimes it could be an estrogen excess. They really dance together. Breast tenderness can often be too much estrogen. And then we have to break it down from there. Why do you have too much estrogen? Are you producing too much? Maybe in your younger years, and maybe everyone is individual, but
sure.
Are you producing too much? Do you have too much in relationship to your progesterone? Because they're like the yin and the yang, from Oriental medicine. And so they are in relationship to each other. So say your progesterone is supposed to be here and your estrogen is also supposed to be there. Now, if your progesterone drops and your estrogen hasn't moved, well, now you have estrogen dominance, but not because you're producing too much estrogen, because your estrogen is where it's supposed to be, but because you're not producing enough progesterone. Or does it have nothing to do with the actual production? Is it that you're recirculating it in your gut and your bile is stagnant and not flowing and you're not excreting it? Or is your liver congested? So there's all these different pieces. And fatigue, I know you mentioned fatigue, and fatigue is a huge piece. And so why are we fatigued? So in a beautiful world, when we go through menopause, the adrenals are supposed to take over the production of our sex hormones. And so find me a woman in her 40s, 50s that hasn't had stress, that adrenal glands are not compromised in some way. It's not very common. We are all playing the game of life, and we have our ups and downs, and whether it's work stress, family stress, environmental stress, media, news stress, whatever the stress is, there's lots of different flavors for us to choose from. And so our adrenal glands get compromised. So if you're listening and you're going menopause is 10 years away from me, pre-game, pre-planning, prevention. And so you want to be focusing and loving on your adrenals and getting a 4-point salivary test to see what your cortisol is, practicing lifestyle measures that nurture and nourish the adrenal glands so that when you go through the transition, you might not have as many symptoms because your adrenal glands can actually pick up the slack. But that's typically not what I see. I don't see the adrenal glands. So you could be fatigued because your adrenals are off. You can be fatigued because your thyroid is low. You can be fatigued because your estrogen and progesterone is out of balance, because you don't have enough testosterone. There's so many different reasons. It's really a hormonal symphony.
Yeah, it sounds like there's just so many contributing factors. Because I was just thinking as you were speaking, like, what if you did really understand how to manage and work with the stressors that you had, and you really understood self, you were compassionate and curious and kind to self, you weren't reactive, and you understood your parts, right? Maybe you just worked with a therapist and you're really good with stress. Do you see a difference in women who come in with that sort of loving kindness and understanding of self versus those who haven't gone down that route? Or is it like it's physiological and psychological? So it's both. And we've got to really sort of open up Pandora's box to figure out where this is all coming from.
everything is definitely physiological and psychological in my experience of all of life. But I do see, yes, I mean, I personally am a perfect example because I really did pre-game out my hormonal journey because it was so horrific and I was struggling so bad with my cycles and PMS that was 3 weeks out of every 4 weeks. I felt good 1 week a month. And I was a physician working with women, helping them with menopause, and thought, I better practice what I preach. I want some of what I'm giving them. And so in my early 30s, I balanced my hormones. And because this is my life and my work, so when I went through menopause, I had no symptoms. I never had a hot flash. And it's just not common. And it's not because I'm like better than anyone else. I just very conscious of it, but it's not very common in our society and how we've set up the medical system that we think ahead, that we're planning ahead.
Right.
We're not going, I should really love on my adrenal glands right now because they're going to really be, they're important all the time, but in 10 years, I need them to kick in and support me. And so typically when I'm in my office and working with patients, we're beyond that. I also think that at this age, we just have this level of wisdom, and that's where we can really start to feel those beautiful words you just said, curious and kind to ourselves, and just to a degree that I don't think we're capable of when we're in our 30s or 40s even. I think it really is. We get wiser and wiser as we age.
Yeah, one of the beautiful byproducts of aging. Let's jump into menopausal weight gain. I know you hear it. I hear it all of the time. So many people literally blame menopause for their belly fat gain, weight gain. So let's talk about some maybe practical strategies to address menopausal weight gain. And what are you seeing? Is it the way that we're eating? Have we shifted our patterns? Do we need to shift how we approach nutrition once we drop in estrogen so dramatically? What's your insight and thought about that?
Yes, and yes. So yes, as estrogen drops, we can have more belly fat. There's the distribution of fat is different, and it loves our bellies. And we also, many of you probably heard about like high cortisol and the stress of menopause giving you belly fat. And that too can be a contributing factor. But I have to tell you that I see more often in practice, and have for always, lower levels of cortisol than the high levels of cortisol. So often what we hear about in the media is not what's actually happening in our bodies. So it's really important to check, test, don't guess, so you know. But I think our needs change, and we can't always get by with what we got by with, and our need for protein becomes much higher, and we have to shift and of course you're the expert in this, but our exercise needs change. The days of high cardio are not what our bodies need anymore. And so how we lose weight changes. We also have this connection with the thyroid gland, which often will slow down around that time, and that can put weight on. So it's always very multifactorial and very individualized. But it is not a menopause sentence. You're going to get old and you're going to get fat and you got to stay that way. That is, it's just figuring out what is it for you. It could be accumulation of toxins. It could be that you are not sleeping properly. It's figuring out what is going on with you physiologically, also psychologically, and what are the factors that are playing a role for you. And often it's changing your exercise, getting the protein up, making sure you're hydrated, balancing the hormones, supporting the thyroid, loving on the adrenals. It's a whole, but I personally, I weigh less now in menopause than I did in my younger years. And I see it all the time with patients. And so it's not something that you have to accept. It's one of those, when I was saying in the beginning, it's like one of those things we've just it just floats around in the ethers. You get old and you get fat, and that's the way it is. And obviously we know, for following the channel, we know that's BS.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I did this coaching call yesterday where we're talking all about processed food too. And I think sometimes as life gets busy, right, we maybe do carry that extra stress. Our tendency might not be to prepare our whole foods, to eat our whole foods, right? We're rushed, so we're grabbing things that are more highly processed. And how the body breaks down and the thermic effect of highly or hyperbolic hypercaloric foods versus whole foods is really different. Like a very interesting study that showed that whole foods have a bit of a higher thermic effect, which means your body is going to use energy to break those foods down, generally because they're higher in micronutrients, they're higher in fiber, right? They're higher in natural foods that the body has to work to break down. Whereas processed foods or hyper processed foods are stripped of those things. And so we might be gaining weight because of that as well. So it's, it's all of these little things that add up. And I think we just don't notice it over time. We stop moving as much, right? We might start drinking more alcohol. We might start eating more processed foods. We might have increased stress. We might stop sleeping less, and our hormones might be fluctuating. And then all of a sudden we're gaining weight and we're like, well, why? Right. But it's this
when we're younger, the body is much more forgiving. And so to me, it's just a way of saying, you got to love yourself more. You got to spend the time to shop, prepare, cook, eat in a parasympathetic state, healthy foods and healing foods and the right foods for you. And maybe all along you've been eating gluten or dairy or other food sensitivities that your body is just like, nope, you can't do it anymore. And you made me think of something when you said, like, our memory, we forget things. And that also, it's just another good one to show the multifactorial, because if you do have high cortisol, it'll affect your hippocampus, the part in the brain that stores short-term memory, and you can become forgetful. If your thyroid gland is not optimized, you can have brain fog and become forgetful. As your estrogen levels are decreasing, estrogen is a huge one for brain health, and one of the biggest reasons, and there's many, but that I'm really emphatic about postmenopausal, you have to have bioidentical estrogen replacement for prevention of Alzheimer's, of course, cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis and diabetes and other things, but it's such food and fuel for the brain. And so when we optimize, we can really go, oh, wait, those symptoms, I don't have to put up with that. I just have to get optimized and take care of my body the right way.
Right. Yes. A lot of women experience trouble sleeping, right? And again, I think that is such a basic principles. Like one of the first principles that we want to start off with is getting that good sleep, because it's going to influence our nutrition, our workouts, our mental health, right? It's so important as a pillar. So fatigue and tiredness are super common complaints among women with menopause. What are some natural remedies or even lifestyle adjustments that we can make to help boost energy levels and maybe combat that fatigue?
Yes, excellent point, because that's one of the things when someone comes in and they're complaining about fatigue, the first thing I talk about is, what's your sleep like? Because if your sleep is off, then it's not about taking the right B vitamins or taking something to pump up your energy. It's about getting you sleeping, because sleep really is the foundation of healing. And it goes back to that weight gain. If you're not sleeping, then your hormones are not being secreted at the right point in time, and you're certainly at risk for gaining weight. So from a hormonal perspective, progesterone is a game changer. It is the one hormone that is the first thing I look at, and I would say 85% of the time knocks it out of the park, and women are sleeping. So that's a pretty high percentage. Now, you also might need some melatonin. So I talked about cortisol. And often what I see, so we're kind of taught to think our cortisol is just high, and we have all this cortisol, it's making us fat and it's keeping us wired. But a lot of times we don't have enough cortisol until the night when it's supposed to be the lowest, and it pops up. So taking phosphatidylserine, I like Serifos is a brand that works really well. That can help dull the cortisol at night. So does melatonin if that's your issue. sleep habits, like getting out of the I get a gold star because I am doing so much,
Yeah. Yeah.
and stepping more into the human being and really
Apparently Elon Musk just went on that bandwagon. I don't know if you heard about that, but I read that on
well.
Twitter that he used to pride himself for getting 4 hours of sleep, and now he's recognizing the necessity of getting enough sleep for brain function. It's like, yep, you should have thought about that one a long time ago.
That was me in my 20s too. And I think also a friend of mine was telling me, Jamie Lee Curtis. I
Okay.
think she's got, when it was like the Academy Awards, I think she was saying, don't invite me to a party that's beginning at 9 o'clock. I'm going to be in bed by then. And I do dinners with a bunch of women who are colleagues in the area, and we love it. We're all like, meet for dinner at 5.
Yeah.
So I could be home by 7:30, digesting and sleeping by 9. And
We used to mock that in our parents, and now that's us. Totally enjoying being in bed by 9. Love it. But
my,
that's because we're up at 5 o'clock. Crack
my
of dawn.
time is 9:15. That's my new sweet spot.
Mm.
But I'm in bed by 8:30 and sleeping
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
9:15.
Me too.
And so it is having a consciousness, and there are lots of different things you can try, from L-theanine, 5-HTP. Make sure you're not taking like SSRIs, because those can interact. You can be using passiflora, valerian, lavender. There's lots of different ashwagandha. There's lots of things that help to calm you down at night and get you sleeping. Magnesium is a huge one, really puts you into parasympathetic. And I'm fine with all of those, but I'm really about finding the root cause. So you can take L-theanine and you can take GABA, but if you're not sleeping because it's your progesterone's low or your cortisol is high, then you're just band-aiding and you're not going to have the same benefit. I'm also a big fan, I wear an Aura ring, and I think that it gives you a lot of good data, because it's not just sleep, it's the quality of sleep, it's the deep sleep, it's the REM sleep. And this really breaks it down and helps you understand what kind of sleep you're getting. I think it's really, to me, sleep has always been one of my non-negotiables. Once I got past that crazy time in my 20s where I was proud for only getting 4 hours.
Yeah.
And so it's really looking at I always talk about the calendar as being like one of the greatest health tools you can use for scheduling in your exercise, and for also planning your day so you're not busy till 9 o'clock, that you've shut down, that you're eating 3 hours before bedtime. Like that's something everyone can start to do. That's a huge one. So that way, by the time you go to bed, you're not digesting food, and you can focus on digesting the day's events and getting into a good relaxation. Taking journaling or meditating, getting rid of the blue lights, screens. If you're gonna wear your blue blocker glasses, if you have to, we say like 3 hours before no screens. That's probably a little unreasonable in our day and age. So put on blue blockers, and really connecting to how important sleep is. I always talk about triaging. Come 7 o'clock, I'm like looking at my desk. I'm looking at, is there dishes? Is there laundry? And I'm making executive decisions. This is going to get done tonight, and all the rest is going to wait.
Yeah. Well, because we know what we're like the next day if we don't have it. One of the things we've read about a lot, and just different studies on our ghrelin and leptin levels. When you have a lack of sleep, so somewhere under that 5-hour mark, we have increased levels of ghrelin, which is the go hormone, which makes us feel snacky and, wanting to eat. And the food that we do eat is not satisfying. But when we do have adequate sleep in that 7 or 8 hours, we have higher leptin levels, which is the satiety hormone. So we feel more satisfied by the food that we eat. We're not as snacky or apt to reach for things that are hypercaloric. So, it impacts our sleep. It impacts your workout, again, your relationships. So it really does filter down into all of these things. Touches everything.
I want to add one other thing that I think is important, that I see a lot in practice, is being connected to feeling tired. I have a lot of patients who will say, I don't go to bed till 12:30 or 1, and then I break down. Well, what's exactly happening? And a lot of them get tired around 9 or 9:30, may even fall asleep on the couch. but they're not in their bed, and then
Yeah.
they wake up and then they go back to watching TV. And so if you
Right.
miss that window when your body wants to fall asleep, then often you get this second wind. And so
Yeah.
really honoring, if you're tired at 8:30 or 9, go to
Yeah.
bed at 8:30 or
Yeah.
9, and
Yeah.
paying attention. In traditional Chinese medicine, there's something called the cycle of tides, and every 2 hours there's another organ energy that is expressed in a greater detail than the other meridians. And so, for example, between 1 and 3 a.m. is the time of the liver. And a lot of women will wake up. I wake up every day and I look at the clock and they say, and it's 2:10 a.m. And so you can piece that together and understand, why am I waking up and what's going on with my organ, and does my liver need more support? And so there's always so many different ways the body's giving us cues about what needs to happen.
Yeah. I've done some research of Dr. Matt Walker. He's written the book called Why We Sleep. And he talks about napping as being something that is okay, but you have to make sure that you're napping, like at least 10 hours before your bedtime, and setting a clock or an alarm to make sure that you don't nap past that, 30 to 45-minute mark. So I'll do that periodically. But it's interesting what happens is that when you do nap, we clear the adenosine out of our brain. So that is what makes us sleepy, right? That's sometimes when we have caffeine, it also can clear the adenosine out. And then, so this is why if you nap too close to your bedtime, you've cleared it out. And then it's very challenging to fall back to sleep. So for the people, like you said, who fall asleep on their couch at 7 p.m. and then get up and have their second win, well, they've cleared out the sleep. They've cleared out the adenosine in their brain. And so it basically has to reaccumulate. And that can make, a deep, restful sleep really challenging. So if you are going to nap, then to make sure that you're doing it quite early in the day, again, setting that alarm and keeping those naps shorter. I think NASA called it the Power 17 or something. They tested having a 17-minute nap and found that it was very effective on cognition and memory and functioning for the rest of the day. So there you go, nap, but not too close to bedtime.
I'm like, if I nap 10 hours before my bedtime, I'll be like napping at like 10 a.m. in the morning with my granddaughter.
Just waking up. I know.
And even if you don't, I'm not a good napper. I don't do well with naps. But even just taking a chill break and meditating, or going and putting your feet on the earth and sitting in the sun and getting some sunshine, just kind of giving yourself some space to chill out, be really effective as well.
So good. Speaking of chilling out, and we sort of did dive into stress already, but what role does stress management play in menopause, and how can women effectively navigate or minimize or work with stress to promote hormonal balance and overall wellness?
One of my things I say all the time is stress is the cause of 99.9999999% of all disease and imbalance.
Isn't it? It is.
Stress is huge. And if you start to boil it down, it always comes back to, are you breathing? Are you in the parasympathetic mode? Are you in sympathetic? Are you able to respond rather than react to stress? Are you able to have a good mindset? And so in menopause, I don't think you're going to de-stress your way out of not having the proper hormones. It's not it's a normal thing that our hormones decline. It's just we're living so much longer now that we need to give them back so we can live healthy. Because I'm about extending your lifespan. I'm not just about the quantity. I am first and foremost about the quality. So I don't think you can say, well, I'm just so stressed, and that's why my estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, and DHEA, and pregnenolone all dropped after menopause. But taking the hormones is just one piece. They have to go into a body that is relaxed and handling stress and detoxing. And so it's a big marriage with the mind body. And so looking at stress, and if you're listening and you're in menopause, like, it's never too late to start. We can always undo what's been done and move forward from a different place. If you're younger, like, start now. If you're listening and you're menopausal, but you have younger loved ones, friends, family, colleagues in your life, let them listen to this. Like the education about it is so important. And it's really, a lot of times I think about health as reverse engineering. And at the end of the day, when you're on your deathbed, what's going to really be important? And when you're stressing about something, is it going to matter in 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 months or 5 years? And I was away at a workshop. I came home just this past week. Before I even got home, I stopped at my chiropractor to get an adjustment. Was in the chiropractor for 5 minutes, came back out, and my rear view mirror was hanging by a bunch of wires. It just collapsed. I was like, okay. And then I got home, drove home 15 minutes, found out the air conditioning in my house was not working. I'm in Arizona, it's 100 degrees. And then, so I'm like, these things happen in threes. So I was like, okay, that's 2. Thinking, what's going to be the third thing? And my girlfriend's like, oh, don't worry, I have ants. I'm your third thing. And I'm like, I hope so. The next morning, I'm talking to my assistant, we're video chatting, and all of a sudden, I can't see her. I can only hear her. And my whole iPhone screen just went black. And so my phone was rendered ineffective and had to be somewhere, but couldn't GPS it. And so 3 huge things. And I was like, I could have gotten really stressed out, but I just kind of laughed. I said, okay. My daughter-in-law said, I think we need to sage you. There's probably something going on in your energy field. And I just kind of laughed at it. I'm like, okay, here we go. And I got the AC fixed and I got the phone fixed. And honestly, my rearview mirror is not fixed yet because I got to find someone to fix it. And so was I going to let that ruin my biochemistry, my physiology? Because when we get stressed, it really takes an effect on us. It robs our progesterone, it causes inflammation, it degrades our hormones. And so we have to really be thinking about these things. And again, what I said, how do you dance with stress? How do you respond rather than react?
So how can I ask you just even a personal question? Like how do you move to that place then? Right? Like what sort of inner work did you have to do in order to get to a place where you could laugh about something like that as opposed to explode? Right? Because that feels like a natural reaction is just to lose it because these things have happened. But there's been work that you've done in order to shift inside. So what are some of the things that you've done to get there?
A lot of work. So meditation, being mindful, meditating is a big one. Exercising. To me, it's like exercise is the way to release. If I'm having a bad day or there's a conversation or someone, I'm like, let me go exercise and let me see if I still, and more often than not, come back, whether it's hot yoga or a hike or whatever it is, and like, oh yeah, I guess it's not really, like you just blow it out. Sometimes we just over respond. I mean, I've been on this journey for 30 years now. So there's a lot I have done. It's definitely cumulative, but having a therapist, there's no shame in having a therapist. I think it's important. I think everyone could do well from the right therapist and a good therapist and getting body work and moving the energy. And I move my lymph and I sweat. And so there's lots of things, but I would say mindfulness.
Yeah.
Mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, that's John Kabat-Zinn's work, which I was trained to teach. You can find an 8-week class pretty much anywhere.
Sure. Yeah, there's lots. Yeah.
Online, in person. That training, and sometimes we laugh and say the stress reduction training can be stressful, but that training really teaches you how to be mindful, not just of the beauty that surrounds you, but mindful of how you are responding to
for sure. Yeah. How do I feel? How is this landing in me? What are my emotions? Like all of those things are so critical to begin to understand so that in the moment of reactivity and exploding to a stressful situation, you can take a step back or even pop out of yourself and just observe what you're doing, right? And it's those moments of being present and in the moment and in your body that you can then make a decision to, okay, my life is not in danger right here, even though my brain thinks I am. I'm just going to do some deep breathing to bring my prefrontal cortex back online so that I can make some wise choices here. Because once the cortisol is released and we think our life's in danger, right? Someone cut us off in traffic. Clearly, this is the end of the world, when it's really not, right? Our life isn't in danger. We're just responding as though it were. And so it's a lot of work to sort of get to that place that you understand what your triggers are, right? What sets you off? What are the internal stories that you tell yourself? Though that takes work to explore those things. And I agree, work with a therapist can help you move into that place so that you can begin to get a handle on the things that are triggers for you. Knowing that they're going to come, and how are you going to work with it this time? How are you going to manage it? Stress won't go away, likely. We live in a world where there are stressors. So I think instead of saying, oh, I just got to get rid of the stress in my life, maybe it's wise for us to say, how am I going to work with this? How can I manage this? And what are some of the skills that I can begin to work on, like the meditation and mindful attention and, daily practice? You're not going to get better at it if you don't practice it, right? So Insight Timer is free. You can open the app, do a 5 to 10 minute meditation every day, practice bringing yourself into the moment, into the present, practice listening to the breath and relying on the breath to make you present. But yeah.
Being kind to yourself,
Yeah.
because it's easy to talk about. And I started meditating when I was like 24. So I've been meditating for over 30 years. And so it's not something that happens. And being realistic, like I still get annoyed and angry and pissed off and all these emotions that we think are negative and we don't want to have. And so it's not getting rid of the emotions.
Right.
It's just sitting with them and accepting them and exploring them and having a relationship with them so they move through you and they don't stay stuck in your body. Because when they stay stuck in your body, they congest your fascia and they cause disease. They root into the organs. So it's kind of a life journey path. And just to reiterate what Tracy's saying, you won't have stress when you're dead. If you're alive, you're gonna have stress, whether it's emotional stress or anatomical stress in your spine, toxic stress, the invisible EMF stresses, the 5G, the food, the pet, like there's so many different ways that stress affects us, the blue lights. And so I just want to reinforce again, being kind and gentle and celebrating yourself. I just wrote my weekly newsletter and I wrote about my 9-month-old granddaughter who's now walking, and she looks like she's tipsy, like she just got out of the bar, but she's so proud of herself and she's so happy. And but it was just a reminder, because when she falls down, she just smiles and laughs and she just picks back up and keeps going. And we have forgotten, we all were once that little 9-month-old, and we have forgotten that it's okay to fall, it's okay to get angry, we can just pick ourselves up. And the most important thing is to not beat ourselves up, to just accept that we're human and sometimes we don't make the best choices. It doesn't mean we have to beat ourselves up. We can stop in that moment, be mindful, acknowledge it, and move forward with grace and kindness to ourselves.
I love that. That's good. I won't keep you much longer. There's another question I did want to ask you, though, because others have asked me this, and you're the expert here. Are there any specific supplements or herbal remedies that can assist with our menopausal symptoms? Like if we're maybe not at that place, or maybe even financially where we can't afford HRT or BHRT. I know that's what you recommend. Are there any other supplements that we can begin to take to help us on our journey with some of these symptoms?
I think collagen is a good all-around one for our gut health and for our skin. I think taking adrenal herbs, and it could even just be as simple as supporting your adrenals with vitamin C, and a good B complex and some extra pantothenic acid, which is B5, because that really feeds the adrenal glands. I love a good quality fish oil. I think whether you're having joint pain or inflammation, that fish oil does the body good. It helps the cells need to be fluid. And so that way nutrients can get in and toxins can get out. And good fish oil will help keep the cell wall fluid and not make it rigid where things can't move in and out. Some of the things we talked about before for sleep are certainly very helpful. I am an herbalist as well. I don't really I'm a big believer in, and I know there's like weird, like, oh, I want to do things natural, so I'm not going to take bioidentical hormones. And I do want to just say that in my world, in my professional opinion, I'd rather you take nothing if you're not going to take bioidentical hormones. The synthetic ones, in my opinion, and in my experience, are very dangerous and can cause a whole host of side effects.
Would like to actually jump right there. Sorry to interrupt you, but I would love to hear just the difference between those two. So a lot of people take HRT, a lot of people take BHRT. Can you just give us sort of like the Coles notes? I think that's a Canadian, just like the brief summary of each. Do you know what Coles notes are? It's basically like the short note. Like it's if someone read a book and then wrote a little
we say the Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes, okay, and we call them Coles Notes. We had a bookstore called Coles up here in Canada. Anyway, so give me the Cliff Notes, yes, of HRT versus BHRT, because I think that's a question a lot of people might have as well. And yeah, go ahead, let us know.
So bioidentical hormone replacement is just that. It's bioidentical to what your body creates. And so estrogen gets a really bad rap. We think estrogen causes cancer. It doesn't. If estrogen caused cancer, then when you were going through puberty and your estrogen was like coming on full steam, we'd see a lot of breast cancer and girls going through puberty.
Yeah,
we don't.
Right.
We see it in women who are postmenopausal. And so the synthetic hormones do not look like our hormones that we produce. So when the body receives them, they don't match into the receptor sites properly. The body doesn't recognize them. And so there's a lot of side effects. And so progesterone is a really good example because progestins, not progesterone, are synthetic, the progestins. And they cause a lot of the things that I use progesterone to treat, be it infertility, they'll cause miscarriages. To stop bleeding, they cause bleeding. To treat breast cancer, they cause breast cancer. So they're synthetic. A lot of them come from, like the Premarin comes from pregnant horse urine. It has estrogens in it that aren't even found in the human body. They're actually not even found in horses' bodies. They're only found in pregnant horses' bodies. So they're not even good for horses. So they're certainly not good for us. And so there's a huge difference. And this happens over 2 decades in practice. This still happens where patients will read something and they'll get freaked out. Is it okay that I'm taking this because I read it's going to give me cardiovascular disease? And I have to always remind them, no, that's talking about synthetic hormones, the bioidentical hormones, when properly dosed, when given in the right forms, when properly monitored, we don't see any of those issues going on. So the synthetic ones are pharmaceuticals. And unfortunately, the pharmaceutical companies are not interested in your health. They're interested in their stock and their bottom line. I mean, that's just the unfortunate truth. And so I won't work with anyone who's on birth control pills. You got to get off them if you want to work with me. I won't work with anyone who's on synthetic hormones because it's just doing too much damage. And if I want to help you heal and get balanced, we can't have that huge impulse coming in.
As we finish off here, then, what would you tell our listeners today? Maybe they're just starting this journey. They're just discovering that maybe they're gaining weight. Maybe they're not feeling good, not sleeping well. What's the first line of business? What's the first order of business that they should do? Visit a healthcare professional? Like, what would you suggest they do? And maybe what are some of the things that they should explain to their doctor that's going on?
definitely come to my summit because I'll dive in more deeply to a lot of these things. And I do think that this is important to have a healthcare professional on your team and to understand that even if someone is a natural healthcare professional, they might not be the right fit for you. That everyone expresses their gift as a healthcare practitioner differently, and to really trust your gut, trust your instincts, and to not stop looking for the right team for you. And that might include an acupuncturist, a naturopathic physician, a psychologist. That it's good to have a team handling the different areas. But I do think when it comes to hormones, they have to be properly tested and properly administered and properly monitored. I've seen many patients come in who were on hormones, but they were on the wrong hormones, or they were monitored in the blood. And so then their levels looked elevated, or in the saliva. And then they were told, oh, you have to stop your hormones. So it's definitely a dance. It sounds like I do a lot of testing, and I do, but I also listen. Find someone who listens to you, because an easy example is I have patients constantly who are told their thyroids are fine. I run a lot more detailed thyroid workup on them than a traditional MD would. And sometimes even in that, their levels look okay, but look okay according to who? So I have this patient sitting in front of me, and her hair's falling out, and she's depressed, and she's constipated, and she's gaining weight, and she's always cold. And her thyroid levels look okay. But are they okay for her, or do they need to be optimized? And so I'm all about, let's do a trial. Let's support your thyroid gland. Let's see what happens. So you want to work with someone who actually listens to you and sees you and I always say it was a good doctor day because my patients, what they're experiencing, matched the test results, and it was like easy. It's not always so easy. And so you want to find someone who's going to really look at the whole picture for you.
It sounds like we need to really listen to our bodies and our symptoms. And if things don't feel right, go to the doctor and start to, get these tests done and really explore different things to help us improve, these symptoms.
Yeah, there's your intuition is a real good medicinal gift. And there's a difference between watching everything online and thinking you have everything. When we went to medical school, every day we'd learn and be like, oh my God, I think I have that disease. I think I have MS. I think I have cancer. It's like, it's easy. We would just like look at each other and be like, oh my God, now I have that. So it's
Dr.
easy.
MD. Yeah.
When you hear about these things. So it's like getting clear in yourself. And when you learn to meditate and calm the mind and calm the nervous system, you can really get clear on what is your intuition saying. And I always listen to my patients, even if it seems like it's out of left field. I listen because you live in your body 24/7. You know your body better than anyone.
For sure. For sure. All right. Very good. Thank you for this conversation and for your time talking to us. I would just implore any of you who are interested in educating yourself further in menopause and all things women, really, to make sure that you attend the Menopause Transition Summit coming in September. I'll have a ton of emails and links to that. But in the meantime as well, can you tell the followers where they can follow you?
If you just put in Dr. Sharon Stills, my website is drstills.com. If you sign up for like my free download or whatever, you'll get on my email list, and I email frequently and talk about different things. And I'm on Instagram, and I'll
make sure. Good. I'll make sure I put her links right here on the screen so you can make sure that you follow and educate yourself as we move through this transition time. Good times. Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Stills. I appreciate that. And to all of you who have joined, go move daily in your wellness now and take care of yourselves. And we'll see you in the next coaching call.